This happened to me in 1996, in my hometown of about 100,000 people. I was 15 years old at the time, from the suburbs, and went to a high school in the city. English is not my first language, so I apologize for any grammatical mistakes. I finished with class, and for some reason, I decided to walk to the main bus station instead of just waiting at the nearby bus stop. I stood at the gate that my bus line number 15 starts from. Another bus line number 17 also starts from the same gate. After waiting for around 10 minutes, a man asked me if bus number 17 had taken off yet. I say, yeah, I'm sorry, you just missed it. The man, who looked to be around 30 or 40, then introduces himself to me as Mark. He stretches out his hand for me to shake it. I don't want to be impolite, so I do. I introduce myself as Maya. My name is not Maya. It was bizarre to me that a grown man is introducing himself to me at a bus station. I may have been 15, but I knew better than that. He asks if I just finished school for the day. I say yeah. He asks me what school I go to. I lie. He asks me if I'm going home. I say no, even though I am. He asks where I'm going. I say, to a friend's house. My bus pulls up and I get on it. Strangely, this man, Mark, gets on as well. I know for a fact he'd asked me if number 17 had taken off yet. If he was originally planning on going number 17, there's absolutely no reason for him to get on my bus, number 15. They don't have a single stop in common. I sit down, and of course he sits next to me. He asks me which year of high school I'm in. I lie and say that I'm a junior. I was actually a freshman at the time. He responds and says that I look way too young to be a junior. I say I hear that all the time. He then asks me if I have a boyfriend. I say no, and he says that I should. Then I ask him where he's going. He says that he's going home. I ask if he was planning on taking bus number 17. He says no and tells me that he lives at the very end of bus line 15. That was odd. I've never seen him on this bus before. He then again asked me if I was on my way home, and again I say, no, I'm visiting a friend. Looking back, he knew I was lying. I was sure he believed me, and I really thought I had the situation under control. I should have walked up to the bus driver and told him what was going on. I didn't, of course, because I just wasn't scared enough, and I didn't want to make a scene out of nothing. There were plenty of people around, and while he was strange, I really thought he was just a harmless, lonely weirdo. We eventually get to my stop. I purposefully miss it and get off at the next one, thinking I'll fool him and just walk home a bit longer. To my surprise, he gets off as well. I ask him where he's going, and he says that he wants to walk me home. Again, I tell him that I'm not going home. I'm visiting a friend. He says that's fine, he'll walk with me. I say he really doesn't need to do that, and then, in a stern, irritated tone, he tells me to shut up and walk. There's no one on the street. We're the only ones who got off the bus here. I'm now alone with this weird man who followed me from the bus station. I can't go home because I don't want him knowing where I live. I start panicking at this point. I don't know what to do, so I just freeze and stand there, silent. In an instant, he went from weird but chatty and smiley to telling me to shut up, and I went from feeling in control to knowing I really fucked up. He puts his hand on my shoulder and tells me that he doesn't have much time, so we should get going. I want to tell him that he clearly does, but I don't want to anger him, so I just nod instead. He tells me that if I'm good, I don't have to be scared of him. I lie and say that I'm not. He asks me if that means I plan on being good, and I say yes. He then forced me to repeat it in a whole sentence. Yes, I will be good. I began walking. I don't know where I was going, I just walked. He walked with me, with his hand still on my shoulder. I was never religious, but I remember praying that I don't pass out. My heart was beating so fast and breathing was so difficult, I was sure I was about to collapse and die. Then I spotted an older man tending his garden in front of a house. That's the last thing I clearly remember. I have a vague memory of running. I was later told that I was screaming for help while running toward that man, while Mark ran off. The older man called the police and they contacted my parents. The police couldn't really do anything but take my statement. Since both my parents worked and couldn't take me to and from school, they bought me a phone the very same day. This was in the 90s when mobile phones were a luxury. I wish the story ended here. After the event, I only ever got on the bus at the stop right in front of my school. A few weeks passed and I did so like any other day. We locked eyes as soon as I stepped on. He was on the bus, with the biggest grin on his face, like he couldn't be more excited to see me. I was so creeped out, I immediately got off and ran into the school. I called my mom in tears, and she had me find a teacher to walk me to her car when she came and got me. The school was then notified of the situation. After that, he was spotted walking around the school several times, sometimes a few days in a row, but sometimes he wasn't seen for weeks. But the police were of no help. They couldn't do anything until he actually hurt me or showed up on the school property or at my house. I spent the rest of the year waiting in the school until late afternoon so my mom could pick me up after work. We always took a very long route home, and I now know that she was making sure we weren't getting followed. My parents then had me switch schools. Thankfully, he was never spotted in my neighborhood, and I'm very sure he never found out my name or got my address. I only ever saw him one more time. I was 21, in my hometown on summer break from university. I saw him in a grocery store in a whole different part of town. He didn't recognize me, didn't even look at me, but I immediately recognized him. Where I live, there is no, quote, convicted criminal list like in the US. Such cases are not reported, and I never found out the man's full name. I have no idea who he is or what he has done in the past, and I don't know what he would have done to me. My belief is that he was mentally challenged, saw me, liked me, and followed me. My mother, though, believes that it had been much more complex than that he was planning something, and that he knew exactly where we were going. My dad still doesn't talk about it. I'm just happy he's out of my life. I went to a wedding of my friend Courtney about 2 days ago, and I still can't shake my mind over what happened. For context, I grew up in a very religious household and went to a church every Sunday, and Courtney is probably the only person from my old church that I still keep in contact with. The situation started at the reception. Courtney was super excited to see me, and was definitely the only person who felt that way, judging from all the stares from the people at my old church. I sat down at my table and started playing something on my phone when some guy sat next to me. He said that the seating chart said that he was supposed to sit at my table, and introduced himself as the groom's friend Anthony. He was pretty cute, so I spent a lot of time talking to him, and we really hit it off. He didn't seem to judge me for being an atheist, and seemed genuinely interested in me. When the dancing started, they played Brown Eyed Girl, and he offered to dance with me. We danced together for most of the night until he left to go to the bathroom, and a little later I did too. When I came back out, I saw that my purse wasn't on the table, which was weird because I swore I left it there. I was tired and thought that I maybe just left it in the car, so I went to the parking lot to check and look for it, and found it on the center console. I still thought it was weird because I really thought that I had brought it inside, but at that point it was pretty late in the night, so I didn't think too much of it. I danced some more and noticed that Anthony was gone. I asked the groom, who said that he had gone home because he wasn't feeling too good. Pretty soon after that, I felt sick too, so I said bye to Courtney and went to my car. As I put my keys into the ignition, I looked behind me and saw something weird. It looked like someone had ducked down from the trunk. I took my keys out and looked back there, and that was when I saw him. Anthony was crouched down in the trunk of my car. I started screaming and ran out with him chasing after me. I went back inside and told Courtney, who immediately told her husband, who walked me back to my car where Anthony was nowhere to be seen. Courtney's husband said that he didn't see his car anywhere, so he had probably left at that point. I left too, but I still feel sick to my stomach thinking about it. He could have easily gone home with me and killed me if I hadn't looked back. Courtney said that she feels terrible that she invited him, and that she had no idea he would do something like that. I haven't stepped out of my house since, because I'm worried that if I do, he'll be waiting for me just like he was before. I've flown with my 1-year-old solo nearly a dozen times. Usually, people are kind and understanding about me having a baby on my lap, and overall, he's a happy, easy baby. He's also very cute, so it's not uncommon for strangers to talk to him. Usually, I don't mind. The last trip I took, I sat alone in my aisle, with a man sitting by himself directly behind me. My baby was tired and fussing. I knew he was tired, but there's not a lot I could do until after we took off. Right out the gate, the man behind me was talking to my baby, saying things like, "Oh, hi, baby. Why sad, baby? Cute, cute baby." I smiled and replied that he was tired, sorry for the fuss, and thank you. After takeoff, I started to get him settled for a nap. The man behind us continued to talk to my baby, putting his hand through the seats to try and grab his feet. Multiple times I asked him nicely to please stop, that my baby was tired and that you're distracting him. He just needs a nap. Finally, I set my baby down next to me. He stood on the floor facing the seat next to me so that I could make him a bottle. The man behind me then stood up and reached over my seat to pick him up. I immediately leaned forward to pick up my baby, saying, "No, thank you. I don't need help. Please, no. No, thank you." The man just pushed me back into my seat while mumbling, "Sweet baby, why baby cry?" I replied very loudly, "No," and quickly picked up my baby. I thought that was the end of that. I was wrong. I tried to rock my baby to sleep while desperately trying not to lose my cool. As I'm rocking him, the man behind me reached through our seat to grab my arm, saying, no rocking, you'll make him cry." I pulled free from him and yelled, "Do not touch me." Again, I thought that'd be the end. I started rocking my baby for a second time. This time, the man behind me reached both hands around either side of my seat to hold me in place, saying, no rocking, stop rocking." I am somewhat embarrassed that I completely lost it. I was clutching my baby to my chest while struggling to get free of him. It hurt. I hit the call light while screaming, "Let me go! Do not touch me! Let me go! Let me go!" He was still holding me by my arms when the flight attendants came running. I could barely get anything out to the flight attendants. Everyone around us was staring. I was sobbing, and all I could get out was that I could not sit there anymore, and for the love of God, please move me. The man behind me tried to get up and move with me, but I told the flight attendants that I did not know him and that he could not come with me. I had a good cry in my new seat, but my baby immediately went to sleep. I was moved to be next to the flight attendant seats. After calming down, I explained to the flight attendants what happened. Multiple times, the man that had been behind me got up to try and come back to my new seat, only to be turned around by one of the flight attendants. Towards the end of the flight, one of the flight attendants told me that they'd explained everything to the pilot, and the pilot had called the FBI and local police to escort the man off the flight. I would also be escorted off, as well as everyone around us that had watched everything happen. He cheered as he was escorted off. I had to interview with the FBI and nearly missed my next flight. After my trip was done, I had to fly back going through the same airport. It was stressful and emotional to say the least, even knowing that he was banned from the airline in that airport. I haven't flown since. To the man that tried to grab my baby from me and then wouldn't let go of me, let's never fucking meet again. When I was about 19 or 20, my very best friend in the world was dating this guy. He was really cute, funny, and sweet. I stayed with her at her apartment a lot, and he used to always come over and hang out. He lived with his great-grandmother, who was really super strict. Even though he was 18, she gave him a curfew, and if he was late, she would lock him out or call the law on him. So he always had to be home by at least like 10 p.m. Anyway, one night I was at her house, and we were drinking and playing cards and stuff. He came running through the door at like 9 p.m. saying that he had gotten into a fight. We didn't think anything of it really, because he wasn't exactly a golden boy, and it wasn't all that surprising. But after about 12 a.m. rolled around, we were all like, "Damn, your grandma is letting you stay out this late?" He ended up telling us that she was asleep and had locked him out. Again, we didn't think much of it. Happened all the time. Later on the next day, I ended up going home. My friend called me that night, crying her fucking eyes out and telling me to look on Jail Tracker. I got on there and looked, and immediately saw her boyfriend, and underneath his mugshot it said murder. I was literally shocked, like, what the fuck? Who the fuck did he murder? I was just there. It turns out, when he came and busted through the door, he had just mangled his great-grandmother to death with a hammer. He sat there and drank with us, played cards with us, and acted like nothing had ever happened. After everyone had left, he ended up telling my friend what he had done. She acted like she was going to run off with him. She went in her room and acted like she was packing her bags up, snuck in the bathroom and called the police. It was really scary and traumatizing for all of us, for real, but especially her. He ended up getting sentenced to like 50 years or something like that. He tried to escape about 4 years after his sentencing, and they added even more time. So I doubt I'll ever be seeing him again anyway. Sorry in advance, I was drunk most of the time during what happened, so I don't really remember every detail. When I was 18 and freshly broken up with my way older boyfriend, I basically went crazy with dating guys. At the time, I also dressed very goth, even going so far as to wear a real corset and trench coat, mostly just enjoying the attention. One particular afternoon, my friend, who was my roommate at the time, and I decided to eat at a local Japanese restaurant, with both of us all dressed up. Our waiter was a mediocre skinny white guy who clearly was a little alternative, but it was hard to tell really with the uniform. We joked about me leaving my phone number on the receipt or something, so I hyped myself up and did so. Late that night, he had sent me a text. We talked for a few days, never really having a right time to meet up as I worked 40 minutes away from where I lived. He mentioned the boots that he wore meant a lot to him, and some other odd things that just seemed like edgy jokes. One really late night coming home, I was texting and driving, as any 18-year-old does, and we decided to meet up. My stupid self invited him over to my apartment, where it was just me and the roommate who had been there with me before. At first, it was fine because I was already drunk, so I would just let him rant about whatever he wanted. He went on about his life, going to jail, medical bills, his parents, etc. Eventually, he asked me if I wanted to see his tattoos, and I was like, okay. He lifted up his shirt, and not only could I see the handgun tucked in his waistband, but also his multiple badly covered up Nazi tattoos. One was even just slightly covered with a banana. I don't know what it was, but I simply decided the best way to deal with this situation was to appease him, so I went along with it casually. I don't remember exactly every detail because it was over 2 years ago and I was drunk, but he ended up pulling his gun out and putting it to my head, asking me if I was scared. I was immensely confused and tried to call his bluff, saying I wasn't, which got him to put it away for a while. When we went to hook up in my messy-ass room, he pulled it on me again, saying he wanted to do it while it was out. At that point, I got mad and tried to fight him off of me and get it away from my head. Of course, I wasn't as strong as him, and he hit me in the arm with it, which that shit hurt because it was a nice one. When I finally got him off of me and he realized that I was pissed, not scared, he started acting like a crackhead, saying I was crazy for not caring about him pulling a gun on me. He then ran off, jumping the fence of the apartment complex and not even taking his car that he came in. In the morning, his car was gone and I had a large bruise from where he had hit me. While to me, it's a funny story, I now realize how bad it could have ended up. So, to the waiter from the Japanese restaurant, let's not meet. I'm 22 years old now. We used to have a neighbor who was around 60 to 70 years old. He died a few years ago. When he was still alive, he would cause us so much trouble. He scratched our car, poisoned our apple trees and grass, blew up a firework near me to cause me to temporarily go deaf in one ear when I was 4, all kinds of things. His son was a judge in our city, so pretty much everything we took to court was against us. I remember Dad often called us from work to tell us not to be alone at home, and we would have to stay at Grandma's. When I was little, I think around 6 or 7, I would frequently have nightmares about seeing a face outside of the bathroom window. The window was above our bathtub. It's high enough that no one could actually see in unless they climbed the roof of our shed, which is underneath the bathroom window in our garden. Coincidentally, the shed is directly next to a fence that separates our garden from the neighbor's one. I still remember the dreams. I remember having them pretty much every other night. I never told my parents when I was little because we never actually talked about anything, so I didn't really share anything that was happening to me. Well, I grew up thinking they were just dreams and that was it. I did mention them to my therapist last year because we were discussing some personal problems and I felt like this was kinda connected. After coming home, Mom asked me what I talked about with my therapist, so I finally shared that I used to have such dreams. I never really thought about them being real, but she told me I actually did tell her I saw our neighbor on our shed's roof. I don't remember telling her that, but she said I did mention it several times, and even my friends told her that they saw him there when they came over to our house and it creeped them out. Apparently, I never mentioned him watching me shower, but after she told me that, it really clicked with me, and it was as if I suddenly remembered that yeah, I do think it was him. It would make sense, and the fact that it happened still creeps me out. There was another incident though. It happened when I was around 9 or 10. I went to the balcony in the evening. The balcony door was in my room, and I often went there to call my cat home in the evening. But this time I saw a person standing in the middle of our garden. It was already dark out, and I couldn't really tell who it was. I waited for a little bit to see what the person did, but I didn't really see him move. It was as if he was just standing there and staring in front of him. I called out, "Dad?" because obviously I expected it to be him, even though I found it odd. But the person looked up at me, and even though it was dark, I could tell it was someone else. I think it was partly because my eyes had adjusted to the dark, and I could make out the silhouette of the person better. I went to tell my dad, who was actually downstairs, but when he looked, there was no one there. When I went back upstairs to my room and went to the balcony again, I noticed my neighbor's back door closing just as I looked there. I don't remember if it was directly the next day or a few days later, but our grass turned brown and we found out that it was poisoned, most of the grass being out of reach from his property. I just woke up in the middle of the night remembering this and need to get it off my chest. When I was about 16, my dad, brothers, and I lived in an old rundown house in the middle of nowhere. It was a private rental. My brother would do work for the landlord to pay our rent. Our landlord never came off as particularly creepy, but that could be because I rarely went outside when he came over to talk to my dad, and he wouldn't dare do anything in front of my dad. I was home alone one day. My dad and brothers were out, somewhere, I don't remember. I had my dog in a fenced-in yard outside, but that was it. I was in my room doing whatever I was doing, probably playing The Sims 2. As I said, we lived in the middle of nowhere, and there was a long driveway which the window to my bedroom directly faced. I could see or hear anyone driving up the driveway. I saw a car, not my dad's, and I immediately freaked out. I ran and shut all the blinds in the house, turned off all the lights and checked the doors were locked. It was our landlord. He lived next door, about 2 miles from our house, and yes, that was the closest house. This wasn't the first time he'd come here unexpectedly. It happened twice before, and both times I was home alone. Those first 2 times, he was only there for 10 minutes, walking around the outside of the house and then quickly leaving. But this time it was different. I grabbed a big kitchen knife and hid under the kitchen table. I heard him pull up outside and open the front gate. My dog outside was going crazy and barking, and I heard him yell, "Shut up, mutt!" I could hear his footsteps, walking up to the door. He tried to open the front door. I was freaking out. At this point, I texted my dad. He was coming straight home, but they'd be like an hour. He continued to walk around the outside of our house, trying to peek in each window. The house is old and you have 3 doors to which you can enter from the outside. He tried to open all 3. I thought maybe he didn't know I was home. Maybe the last 2 times were a coincidence, but he started saying things, including calling out my name. He knew I was home alone. I couldn't hear what else he was saying through the double brick walls, but I quietly creeped through the house, following his voice up and down the hallway. I was trying to hear what he was saying, and that's when he said something I'll never forget. "I'm going to burn this house down, but I'll let you out first." Of course, I didn't take him seriously, which scares me even more. He wanted me to come out. He wanted me to take his threat seriously. That's the part that gets me. I know exactly what would have happened if I believed him, and my life would have been completely different. He was there for at least 30 minutes, maybe closer to an hour, and he was persistent. He left before my dad came home. Once they got there, I told my dad everything, and we moved out soon after. I still don't know how he knew I was home alone. My dad never saw him on the way driving out, so he knew my dad was gone because there was no car in the driveway. But how did he know that I wasn't with him? That's why dickhead creep landlord will never meet again. I came here to tell you my story because there are people that go through these types of relationships and who are maybe still healing, but I also need some advice. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and when I was 14 I liked older guys, and not guys who were 1 year older than me. I mean like 3 to 4 years older. That's when I met my ex. He was 17 at the time and he was a really sweet guy, until he started opening up about his mental health and drug addiction. Don't get me wrong, I don't judge him for being mentally unstable, but he never took his prescription and he just threw tantrums all day. He verbally abused me and overall didn't care about me. I was with him for 2 years until one day he finally blocked me, basically ending our relationship, and I never heard from him since, until 2 months ago. I came home from school one day and I looked inside the mailbox because I saw an envelope. It was unusual for us to receive envelopes unless it was a bill, but it wasn't an envelope for bills. It was one meant for letters. I put it in my purse and went inside the house. I went into my room after I said hi to my mom and opened up the envelope. There was no returning address or something like that, but my name on the letter caught my attention. I never received letters from anyone, and I was worried to see a signature that I recognized on it. I started reading the letter, well, hardly because the writing was awful, but the person who sent it was telling me how they regret letting me go and that they wanted me back. I thought that one of my friends was playing a stupid prank on me, so I brushed it off and put it in my drawer, laughing about the situation. Later at night, I was about to go to sleep when an unknown number showed up on my screen. I looked at my screen confused, because I barely received such weird calls from unknown numbers. I didn't really want to pick it up, but I thought that maybe it was one of my friends trying to pull one of their pranks on me as usual. I picked it up and heard breathing. Hello? No answer. Beatrice, are you this bored that you want to pull pranks on me? Still no answer, just heavy breathing from the other end. All of a sudden, I heard his voice. Who's Beatrice? My eyes were wide open, and I hung up. I stared at the ceiling in disbelief, and I put my phone on silence mode and just went to sleep. I didn't think for 1 second that this phone call was about to be the beginning of my biggest nightmare. I woke up the next morning with several calls from that unknown number, and I got a little scared. I opened my phone and saw messages from the same person, telling me to pick up my phone and just talk to them. I tried to ignore it, but the calls and messages continued even after I got to school. When I was outside the school gates and smoking a cigarette with my friend, I got a call again. I answered and gave an upset response. "Dude, who the fuck are you? Why are you calling me?" The person sat in silence for a few seconds and then said my friend's name. They heard their name and asked me who the fuck I was on the phone with. "You're with your friend, aren't you?" "Of course you are. I could see you." I looked around and didn't see anyone other than my other schoolmates. There were only 6 people around us, and nobody else was on a call or something. I got creeped out and hung up. I recognized the voice, and it was my ex's. I told my friend that he kept calling me and texting me from an unknown number since last night, and that I didn't know what to do. She said that I can't really do anything about it, and that I should just ignore the calls. But as time went on, I started to get more letters too, sometimes even flowers right next to the fence of my home. For context, my ex was from another city, and I never told him where I lived. He knew what school I went to, but never which class I was in. Then I started to get single roses once a week on my desk when I got to school. My classmates told me that they never saw the person who brought me the roses, because they were there by the time they got to class too. I was super paranoid. I started to receive pictures of me and my friends outside the school gate, sometimes even when I was alone. I was shitting my pants whenever I saw the unknown number pop on the screen with a picture attached to the message. I finally had enough one day, and I called his number that was still saved in my phone. I called him, but he never picked up. I started texting him on the apps that I didn't get blocked on, and told him to stop, or that I would contact his boss and complain about his behavior, and even make fake complaints about his service at work so that he'd get fired. He really needed the job, so he left me alone for like a week. But then I started to see him on the street, in public transport, and outside my school. Mind you, this dude lived in another country by the time we broke up, and only came back when he started texting me again. I asked some of his friends about the time he got back, and they told me that he came back into our home country the day I started getting the calls. I could barely leave the house after I found out that he knew my school schedule, and I always asked one of my classmates who lived nearby to pick me up with their car on the way to school. One day, I wasn't so lucky, and my classmate who used to drive me to school was sick and couldn't show up, so I had to take the bus that day. When I got on my bus, I saw his blonde wavy hair, and I froze. I literally wanted to cry, and I didn't know how to get out of the bus without him getting off at the same stop with me. In my country, we aren't supposed to talk to the driver while he's driving, but I had no other choice than to ask him to not let him out of the bus. I explained the situation, and he was thankfully understanding, and didn't let him off the bus. He was banging on the glass doors and screaming to be let off at the stop, but the bus driver just kept the doors shut and drove off. I sighed in relief and started crying while I was waiting for another bus to come. It's been a month since school ended, and I haven't seen him after that, but I'm scared that he might come back when school starts. Police won't do anything about it, and I even started getting threatening letters 2 weeks ago. I carry a pocket knife with me when I go out, and I even changed my phone number, but I don't know what else I can do. So, I recently got a job at Walmart in online grocery, and while I don't talk to customers nearly as much as cashiers or customer service, I do have to answer a lot of questions and direct people to items they can't find. There are plenty of stupid people who don't look before asking me where something is, and people who are just plain rude. But besides this one encounter, I haven't really had a problem with creepy men. At my past jobs, I was used to men making horrible comments about my body and body mods, but I guess at Walmart there's always someone weirder walking around, so I don't get as many. It started at around noon when I was out on my first pick run of the day. I was in the soda aisle struggling to fit a box pack of beer into my cart when this guy came up and helped me. He was probably in his early to mid-20s. This kind of adds to the creep factor because I only recently turned 18 and haven't switched out my yellow name tag yet. A bigger guy, a bit shorter than me, wearing a corn shirt. I thanked him for helping me and said that I liked his shirt. He said that it was no problem and complimented my hair. No big deal, right? I pick up my handheld and get back to bagging soda, praying that I don't get sent on exceptions that night. Around 15 minutes later, I'm in the soup aisle, crouched on the floor bagging 20 cans of Dinty Moore. Not my finest moment. Someone walks up behind me and says, "Excuse me?" I'm already excited to talk to them. Nobody, and I mean nobody, says excuse me when they want my attention. I stand up and turn around to see the same guy. He says that he's been looking everywhere and he can't find the baking soda, and that he knows he probably passed it, but he wants to make sure he's looking in the right area. The baking aisle is just a few over, and what a coincidence. The next thing I need for my run is bread flour. I tell him I'm heading over to the aisle the baking soda is in right now, and I'll show him where it is. He says thank you, I finish scanning the Dinty Moore, and we head over. It was a Tuesday, and completely dead, like I was seeing my coworkers more often than customers. We get to the baking aisle and I show him the baking soda before getting to picking out the bread flour. I had a lot to pick from in that aisle, so I was there for a good 10 minutes packing different items, and I couldn't help but notice that he put a tiny box of Arm & Hammer into his cart and was just standing there on his phone, occasionally looking at me. A little strange, but maybe he's texting someone and it's feeling a bit awkward that neither of us have left the aisle. Who knows? I finish my pick run, stage the totes onto the cart, and bring them to the back. I go on 2 more runs before my first 15-minute break, and I catch a glimpse of Corn Guy every so often. I figure he's just having a hard time finding stuff, because the Walmart I work in is massive, and continue on with my day. I go into the break room to eat the salad I had in the fridge and drink a cherry Pepsi, while getting that good gossip from one of the guys from customer service, and life is good. For a second, I thought I saw Corn Guy walking past the door, but I figured it was just an employee wearing the same shirt, and didn't think of it again until later. My manager tells me to do 3 more pick runs before I go to the back to start dispensing orders, and I head out on a produce run. Easily one of the worst types, as the produce section is super confusing and always crazy busy. I get to the produce section and start doing my thing when I see Corn Guy standing next to the corn stand. I laugh to myself for a second, because corn, before realizing that it's 1:30 at this point, and this guy has been at Walmart for at least an hour and a half. There are only 3 things in his cart. I try not to look in his direction so he doesn't try to talk to me, and get back to bagging onions and weighing apples. At this point though, I'm getting some serious weirdo vibes from this guy. He walks up to me and says hi. I say hi back and ask him if he needs anything. He proceeds to go on the creepiest tirade I've ever heard. I remember almost exactly what he said because I was standing there in absolute horror the entire time while holding a bag of apples. He said, I just wanted you to know that you don't need to eat salad if you don't want to. You don't need to lose weight. If you're trying to impress that guy you were talking to, you should go for someone who would love you for who you are, not someone who would want to change you like that. You are so beautiful. I just stare at this man in shock. For one, I eat salads for lunch because I fucking like salad. It sure ain't a healthy salad either. Those things are loaded with Caesar dressing and bacon bits. Second of all, I have a boyfriend already. It's not Gavin from customer service, and he's also fat and could not care less what I eat. Third of all, I take offense that some random creep thinks that I, a grown-ass woman, would have been waiting all my life to be validated by him, a man who spends all day at Walmart without even being paid for it. Needless to say, I'm horrified, embarrassed, because he just said this in front of multiple other customers who are giving us weird looks. And I'm also pissed off by the audacity of this fucking weirdo. Though I can't tell him any of this. I stick with telling him that I think that's inappropriate for him to say. He needs to stay out of employee-only areas like the break room, and if he needs anything else, he can go ahead and talk to customer service. He looks shocked as if this wasn't the nicest way I could have ended the conversation, and I end my pick run early to go talk to a manager. In the back, I tell my manager about Corn Guy, how he's been following me, and how I'm not going back out to pick tonight unless we know for sure that he's gone. She's understanding and lets me start dispensing early, and sends one of the guys in the back to pick in my place. The rest of the day goes okay, except when my coworker and I go out together to take a huge order to one of the spots in the main parking lot, and Corn Guy is sitting on a bench out front. I prayed that he was just waiting for someone to pick him up, and I refused to take any more orders out to the main lot. I managed to put away returns without seeing him and with minimal trouble, and at 8 p.m. I go back to OGP, turn in my handheld and keycard, and say goodbye to everyone left. I always park in the main lot right in front of the grocery section, and as I'm walking, it's just starting to get a bit dark. It had been raining on and off the whole day, and it was the perfect balance of summer warmth and cold rain outside. As I'm unlocking my shitty old CRV, I see the Corn Guy approaching me. I'm scared of what the fuck he wants from me, but at this point I have my keys out, and the pepper spray on the chain is clearly visible, so I'm hoping he isn't stupid enough to try something. He walks up to me and starts trying to talk. I shut him down, tell him that he has been following me all day, a reminder that he has been in Walmart for a full 8 hours at this point, and I am very uncomfortable talking to him. I'm off the clock, and if he needs something regarding Walmart, he can go talk to customer service. And if he wants to talk to me personally, I'm not interested, and he needs to leave me the fuck alone. He has the nerve to look offended, and then says something that tops his salad rant in terms of stupid shit to say to a random woman. Okay, since you're gonna be like that, I won't ask you out, ungrateful bitch. I thought you were cool and could maybe understand me, but you're just like every other girl. I'm too morbidly curious at this point. I ask him what the fuck that means. I mean, you seem cool. I don't see anyone around here with ears stretched that big, or who can appreciate Corn's artistry. I thought maybe you were on my level, but you're just like every other stupid Midwesterner in this shitty town. At the end of this little rant, he digs into the pocket of his sweatpants and produces the shittiest little switchblade I've ever seen in my life. This pitiful thing couldn't even skin a hamster. I'm somehow even more offended. First, I've been stalked all day because I have stretched ears and complimented a guy's band shirt. Second, he thinks Korn is some deep-cut metal band that nobody else has ever heard of. Third of all, we do live in Iowa, but we live in one of the largest cities in Iowa, and this Walmart is right in the middle of it. And fourth, he's not only threatening me with a knife for not living up to his manic pixie dream girl fantasy, but thinks I'm gonna be scared of that pathetic excuse of a knife. At this point, I'm so sick of this asshole, I get in my car, tell him to go fuck himself, slam the door, and get out of there. I haven't seen him since, but I work pretty much every day, so it's only a matter of time. So basically, to the creepy guy in the Korn shirt who pulled a knife on me in the Walmart parking lot, I hope we never meet again. I'm a 36-year-old female in Sweden. I've worked in mental health care for the last 18 years, mainly with people with psychotic illnesses like schizophrenia. I was working at a group home for 9 years, and we're very close with my coworkers there, especially 2 females. The last few years I worked there, another female started working there too. Let's call her M, and the 4 of us grew very close. She was very timid, shy, friendly, and we got along well. She was, however, often on long-term sick leave because of her own mental health issues, so we didn't meet much at work. But she always showed up at our after-work dinners, so we continued to stay in touch even when she wasn't well enough to work full-time. She told us that she had a history of schizophrenia herself, just like the patients we were treating, but that she was medicated and hadn't had a psychotic episode for years. Since I have an education in psychiatry and a long experience with schizophrenia, I have no judgment towards people suffering from the illness, and it didn't bother me being friends with someone who had a diagnosis like that. And even after what I tell you now, I still feel the same way. In the summer of 2023, I had moved on to work at a new place. It was also within mental health, but this time it was forensic psychiatry, like a halfway house for mentally ill murderers, etc. The 4 of us stayed in touch and still met every now and then for dinner parties. Im told us that she had been evicted from her apartment because of an incident where she had accidentally entered her neighbor's apartment in the middle of the night. She told us that in the huge apartment complex, the doors all looked exactly the same, and that she simply walked in the wrong door by accident, and that the neighbors had created a scene out of pure drama and reported her to the police. I somehow felt that while that sounded out of proportion to evict someone just for that, perhaps the landlord took that kind of action because he judged her based on her medical history, and I felt bad for her. I questioned her if something else happened, and she claimed that it didn't, and that was the full story. In Sweden, it's very difficult to get a contract from an apartment when you've already gotten evicted. You pretty much get blacklisted. Im asked me if she could move in with me. Since she was literally on the street, literally homeless, I said, "Of course you can." I've always gotten myself into uncomfortable situations by saying yes instead of thinking about myself, and I had no idea how severe this situation would get when I said yes to Im. I live in a pretty small apartment. It's 1 bedroom that pretty much only fits a bed and a desk. It has a living room that fits a couch and a TV, no room for an extra bed. There's also a small kitchen and a small bathroom, and I have 2 cats. We decided that Im was going to live in the living room, and I offered to throw my couch out so she had room for a bed there. But she said that she was fine with sleeping on the couch since it was comfortable enough. I insisted on giving her a bed, but she declined. There's a door between the living room and the bedroom, but between the living room and the hallway there's just an open arch, so she wouldn't have total privacy. I hung up a thick velvet curtain covering the arch, so at least it gave her some sense of a door and more privacy than nothing. There's another door from my bedroom to my kitchen, so I have 2 doors to my bedroom. I have to have one of them open at night since my cats want to go in and out, and they also have their litter boxes in the bathroom and food and water in the kitchen. I naturally kept the kitchen door open and not the living room door, since that's where Im lived now and we wanted to keep our privacy somehow. She wasn't working at this time because she was on one of her long sick leaves, while I was working shifts, so sometimes I had to get up at 6 a.m. and sometimes I didn't get home until like 11 p.m. I have really severe insomnia and need to combine Ambien with promethazine, and even with all of this I still wake up easily. I told her that I would appreciate it if she could try to stay quiet those nights when I have to get up at 6 a.m., but that it's fine if she's loud when I'm off work or when I do evening shifts. She was a heavy smoker and a coffee drinker, so I bought her a coffee machine to make her enjoy her living situation more. Yeah, I know, I'm a weirdo who doesn't drink coffee very often, so I didn't have one. The coffee machine and the sink were placed right outside my bedroom door. So, the first night together, I had to get up for a 6 a.m. shift. As usual, I had a hard time falling asleep. Im had been up several times that night to go outside to smoke, and I woke up every time. At 5 a.m., she started making coffee, and since it's literally outside my bedroom door, I got wide awake from the sounds of it. I asked her in the nicest way possible why she was up this morning, asking if she had any plans today. I mean, she was on sick leave, why not sleep at 5 a.m. if you can? And she just said that she couldn't sleep. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I would just appreciate it if you could wait with making the coffee till 6 a.m., since I really need that last hour of sleep because of work." Adding to why I need my sleep is that I have epilepsy that gets really bad when I don't get enough sleep. I usually get a lot of seizures when I don't get at least 4 hours of sleep at night. I knew that I would probably get seizures at work now, meaning that this day would be both stressful and potentially dangerous for me since that's a huge risk, especially if I fall and hurt myself, and it's not a good thing to get cramps and seizures among mentally unstable criminal clients who you're supposed to be taking care of. I know that it's not an ideal situation to work in that field with my condition, and I can inform you all that I did quit after only 6 months. She said that she really wanted coffee with her cigarettes, but that she would try to wait the next time I have to work. I accepted it and went on with my day, but things didn't get better. She continued to wake me up early in the morning and through the nights, and continued to promise to stop, but insisted that she really wanted coffee with her cigarettes. I suggested making the coffee the night before, or drinking iced coffee or Coke instead, but she didn't want that. I may add that she demanded for me to be silent at 10 p.m. because that's when she wanted to sleep, and I respected that. She used to get these moments of binge eating where she would empty my fridge and pantry from everything I had. I remember this one time when I had bought a big loaf of bread, and she texted me 30 minutes later after I left the apartment saying, "Hey, I'm sorry, I ate your loaf of bread. I will buy it back once I get money." Like an entire loaf of bread in 30 minutes. I had told her when she moved in to feel welcome at home and what's mine is yours, so I couldn't really get mad, but it started to annoy me for 2 reasons. It was getting kind of expensive since it was such huge amounts, and it was always in inconvenient times of the day, like after an evening shift when the store was closed, and I came home hungry and she had emptied the kitchen from everything I had bought the same day. Im had long black hair that was everywhere, all over the sink, the floor, the bathtub. I'm no clean freak, but I think anyone could understand that this isn't the nicest thing to step in or see everywhere in your house. She had also left her fingernails and toenails on the bathroom floor, and there were pee drops on the toilet seat every time she had been to the toilet. I saw a silverfish on my bathroom floor, as I had never seen one before, and they eat hair and skin and nails, so I figured this fella probably enjoyed life because of the new dirty condition my bathroom was in. At first, I didn't want to say it straight out because I thought I would hurt her, and I didn't want to make her uncomfortable, so I just put a broom and shovel in the bathroom to imply that we need to sweep the floor more often. This didn't seem to work, so after a while, I told her in the nicest way possible with a smile on my face, "Do you think we could try to clean the floor in the bathroom more often? We tend to lose some hair when we brush it, and I'm afraid we may get pests. I saw a silverfish the other day, and I don't want it to get worse." I always made sure to say we instead of you, so she wouldn't feel attacked. She promised to think about it, but nothing ever changed. I started dating a guy and was head over heels for him. He was also in a roommate situation, so we had a tough time getting any alone time. I asked him if there was a chance that we could get one night to ourselves every now and then in the apartment, and that she, of course, would get the apartment to herself as well. She didn't like the idea and claimed that she had nowhere to go, no friends or family. Now, I wasn't asking her to leave for 24 hours, just a few hours so we could get some quality time together. She could just go to the library or take a walk or whatever. I was at work for 8 to 10 hours 5 days a week, so she got a lot herself. One of our old coworkers realized that this was really tearing at my mood, to never get any alone time for myself, and I started feeling really suffocated. She offered that Im could stay the night at her place. After all, they were friends too. Im said that she didn't want to, quote, bother her, but we told her that she didn't. They're friends. She was more than welcome, and I really just wanted one night to myself and my guy. I didn't understand why she made such a big deal over leaving me in the apartment for just one night. She eventually accepted and spent the night there, and I spent the night away the next week so she could get more alone time too. When I came home the next morning from my night away, I saw that my cat's water bowl was completely dried out. There was no spill on the floor, and it looked like it had been wiped out with a towel or paper. I had filled it to the brim just the night before. I asked her how this was possible, and she said that the cats must have tipped it out, but that there was nothing on the floor, like I said. My cats are overly social and usually cuddle up with strangers after just a few minutes. I noticed that the cats withdrew from her more and more over time, and the last couple of weeks, they never left my bedroom except for when they ate or used the litter box. It seemed like they were scared of her, which I couldn't figure out since she was so timid. I had this old saucepan from the 60s that meant a lot to me. You're probably wondering how a saucepan can mean a lot to someone, but it was my grandmother's, and it's the only thing I have left that belonged to her. My mother used to cook for me with it when I was little, so it has a great nostalgic value to me. She burnt it one day and made no attempt to clean it. She just left it on the stove and went out to smoke. I found it ruined and cried. She didn't even say I'm sorry. She also broke dishes several times and didn't bother to replace them or apologize. This added to my frustration with her naturally. It had been about 2 months now since she moved in, and she kept waking me up at night, kept binge eating my food, never cleaned, never left the house, scared my cats, and ruined my things. I soon realized that she stole my prescripted sleeping pills, lots of them as well, and I only get one per night, not more or less. And as you already know, I really need them. I had 20 of them in my nightstand when I left for work, and when I came home, they were gone. She of course denied it, which is pretty hilarious since no one else could have been there. My frustrations were getting heavy. The summer heat was strong and I felt locked up in my tiny bedroom with my 2 cats, never getting any time to myself, never any alone time with the guy I was dating except for once every 14th day. My apartment was messy and she was stealing from me. Out of nowhere, my old elementary school classmate texted me on Facebook asking me how I knew Im. He had seen that I posted on Facebook that we were roommates now. I told him that we were old co-workers and that she needed a place to stay because she got evicted. He said, "I know. Do you know why she was evicted?" "Yeah, she accidentally went into her neighbor's apartment." He replied, "That's not the full story. She broke in and snuck up to their sleeping baby with a knife in her hand, but luckily the father woke up and wrestled her down and managed to save the baby." I felt sick to my stomach. Could this be true? It would certainly explain why she had been evicted, but it just sounded so horrible and she is such a timid, nice girl. I had so many questions. But my friend had the full police report. Apparently the couple that Im had broken into was his ex-girlfriend and her family. It seemed that Im was dealing with psychosis during her break-in, but those parts weren't public. It was clear to me, however, that she had been lying about the whole situation that happened, and about how long she had been mentally unstable. I started getting quite paranoid now, and I was already frustrated with everything, and really wanted her to move out. We did, however, have a contract that said she had 30 days notice. I knew that if I asked her in a harsh way, it would mean 30 days of chaos until she moved out, so I wanted to handle this as nicely as I could. I started looking for cheap hostels for her that I could suggest to her so she wouldn't be on the streets. I sat down with her and told her that I loved living with her and I really feel horrible about this, but I just miss my alone time and that the apartment is too small for 2 people. I told her that it wasn't personal and that I wouldn't want to live with anyone right now. I told her that I wish it would have worked out and that I'm really sorry and I hope that we can remain friends. She looked crushed and said that it wasn't possible. I showed her the hostel that I found and said that I understand that it wasn't the ultimate situation, but I really needed her to move out because I felt suffocated, and also the summer heat was making it tough to always have the door to the bedroom closed, and that it was tough for me to not get any sleep, etc. She said okay, that she was going to try to move out, but not until the 30 days had passed, and I said, of course. The very first night after our talk, she got up and made her coffee at 2:30 a.m. I nearly had a mental breakdown. I was going to get up at 6 and just couldn't go back to sleep. I asked her in the morning for probably the 10th time to not make coffee till I get up, but she didn't even answer me. She just sat on the sofa and stared out the window. I said, "Im?" She just kept staring. I was freaked out, but left for work. She kept being weird, kept making a mess, kept waking me up, kept eating my food, and all I could think about was the incident with her and the baby and the knife. I eventually got so pissed off about being woken up by the coffee maker, so I unplugged it and stored it in my attic, which she had no access to. It may have been childish, but I was getting so tired at this moment. My sleeping pills were stolen, and I was starting to feel like Edward Norton in the beginning of Fight Club. Well, the next night, I woke up at 4 a.m. by her making coffee in a saucepan. Not my grandmother's saucepan, since that one was ruined. I tried talking to her again, explaining the situation, but she just stared and didn't reply. Me being frustrated, and on the tipping point, I took the saucepan and stored it in the attic as well. I know, but I was going crazy and just wanted her to stop with these nightly coffee routines and get the hint. The third night, I had the guy I was dating sleeping at our place because I was getting really paranoid now over her weird behavior. I woke up from my very light snooze by him poking me. He just whispered, "Look." In the doorway, Im was just standing there silently, staring at us. This was like a scene from a horror movie with her long black hair over her face, I kid you not. I didn't say anything at first, because I wanted to know if she was just standing there for a second doing something by the door, but I realized after a while that she was actually just standing and staring at us. It reminded me of the ending of Paranormal Activity, when Katie just stares at Mika in the final scene. So I sat up and said, "What are you doing?" But before I could finish the sentence, she just slammed the door shut, and I heard the sound of something metal falling on the floor and her running into the living room. I yelled out, "You need to leave!" and started crying hysterically because this was turning into a fucking nightmare. Of course, I didn't go back to sleep, and I was really happy that I had company that night. I just kept asking myself, had she done this before? Stared at me in my sleep? The next day when I got out of bed, I opened the door that she had slammed shut and saw a kitchen knife on the floor. So that was the metal sound I had heard before she ran off. I then took all of my knives and locked them in the attic as well. I then asked a friend of mine to come to my house and be there when I tell her that she has to move out immediately, that I can't wait 27 more days. During the conversation, I really tried to stay calm. I know she has a mental illness, I know she means no harm. Even though I was so frustrated, I couldn't hate her. I was mostly scared and tired. She, however, didn't even answer when I talked to her. She just kept staring out of the window. She just left the apartment and sent me a text instead saying that I was being disrespectful for bringing a friend over to her place. Nighttime came, and I thought this would finally be a night of peace and quiet. No coffee maker, no saucepans. But at 3 a.m., I woke up by her burning dry coffee powder in a frying pan. At this moment, I just felt terrified of her. Her face was dead, and her eyes were black. I suspected that she had gone into a psychosis. I stopped the fire, and she just ran off to the living room in silence. I knew that she had an appointment with her psychiatrist the next day, and while she was away, I packed all of her things. I then sent her a text telling her that she needs to pick them up and give me my keys back, and that I will give her money for a hostel the upcoming 26 days. She didn't reply. The guy I was seeing came to keep me company in case she would fight about it. She didn't. She handed me the keys without looking at us and left. Our coworkers who were friends with us both told me that she had moved in with a guy that she was dating, and she stayed there for a few weeks till she somehow amazingly got an apartment of her own. She started working again, and I was really happy to hear this. She seemed to be doing well. Then, in January of this year, one of our old coworkers told me that Im had called her and told her that everything must burn, that she has a baby that she must save, and other delusional stuff. She had called 112, the Swedish emergency number, about all of this, but they hadn't taken it seriously. Im had then proceeded to burn her entire apartment down, because the voices in her head were telling her that she was to burn everything to save her friends and family. Her neighbors had tried to rescue her from the fire, but she had fought them off and ran back inside and poured liquor on the fire to make it burn more. She was arrested and sentenced last week for aggravated arson. She will serve her time in a mental institution in prison for a long time, possibly forever. What's ironic is that she will probably be in a facility where I used to work, and end up where she used to work herself. My old coworker was a witness at the trial, and apparently she stopped taking her medication because she thought it made her feel numb, and she thought she was stable enough to function without it. Apparently not. She had also stopped taking her medication the last few weeks when she stayed at my house, so when she stared blankly into space, she was going into psychosis. When she stared at me with the knife in her hand, when she burnt the frying pan that last night. It's disturbing to think about what would have happened to me and my cats if she would have stayed, or if I would have been a heavy sleeper. I also think about what would have happened to that baby that she snuck into before she was evicted. And yeah, I know it's crazy that I didn't just throw her out by then. It was complicated. The reason why I haven't been able to talk about it with my friends is because they sympathize with her and have minimized my experience, and they think that I make a bigger deal out of it than I believe it has been. I sort of understand it, since they have never seen that darkness in her eyes that I saw those last couple of days.